Well, Stephen, welcome to the program. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
Tell me the story of Tarore.
Well, Tarore was a young Maori girl living in Matamata in the early 1830s, and she began attending a mission school which was set up by Alfred and Charlotte Brown, I think in about 1835. And at this mission school, they taught her to read and write, along with, obviously teaching her about Jesus. And as a reward for her progress, she was gifted a copy of Te Rangapai a Ruka, which is the Gospel of Luke in Maori. It was a newly published edition, published in 1835 at Paihia on the new press up there by the Church Missionary Society and Bible Society was involved. And she was gifted this Gospel, which she read all the time. It was her treasure. She wore it in a kete bag around her neck. It was a treasure to her, and she read it to her family and her iwi, and her father, Ngā Kuku, became a Christian, and so did, I believe, other members of her iwi.
So what happened then? Because sadly it wasn't a happy ending for her.
Well, the mission school had to be relocated in 1836 because of tensions in the area between rival tribes. So they packed it up and they went on a trek to relocate it over to Tauranga. And on the night, I think, of October the 19th, 1836, they were camped at Wairere Falls, and they were raided in the middle of the night by some warriors, and everyone got away except for Tarore, and she was killed. And her killer took the little kete bag from around her neck, which had the Gospel in it, and he took it away back to Rotorua.
But he wouldn't have known what it was. He wouldn't have been able to read.
No, he didn't know how to read, so he knew it was important, because it was something he'd probably never seen before, and the fact that she was wearing it around her neck meant that he knew that it was important to her. So he took it back to Rotorua but couldn't read it. The next day, Ngā Kuku, her father, took her body back to Matamata, where they had a service and she was buried. And he resisted calls for utu, or revenge, which was the way, you get revenge.
And that would have been unusual at that time.
Very, very unusual. And instead he said, no, I will forgive Tarore's killer, which was a huge change. And so back in Rotorua, her killer had the Gospel, and he couldn't read it until a slave boy called Repahau met up with him. And he was a young lad, and he could read, so he read the Gospel to him. And Tarore's killer was quite convicted by this message of peace and forgiveness found in the Gospel. So much so that sometime later he went on a long trek to find Tarore's father, Ngā Kuku, and when he found him, he asked him for forgiveness for what he'd done.
Well, that would have been a brave thing to do, because he wouldn't have known that Ngā Kuku wasn't actually out to get him.
That's right. I think he said, you may take something like, you may take my life for what I've done. And Ngā Kuku said, no, I'll forgive you. And that was the beginning of a good friendship between the two rival tribes in the area.
But interestingly, the story actually spreads out from there, doesn't it?
It does. The Gospel ended up in Otaki after some time. It made its way down there in the hands of Te Raupraha's son and nephew. And a missionary came down to the area as well. And Te Raupraha eventually became a Christian, along with other members of the iwi, his son and his nephew. And then the Gospel then travelled on down to, or parts of the Gospel travelled on down to the South Island as well.
So, moving on, Bishop Selwyn then embarked on his massive journey through the islands of New Zealand. And, of course, he ended up with something of a surprise.
He did. When he got to the South Island, he found that the message of Jesus had beaten him to it. And so there were pockets and areas where Maori tribes, Maori iwi, already knew this Jesus person, and part of this, the reason was from this Gospel that you can trace all the way back to Tarore.
It's a fantastic story, and it's part of our history, which I mean, I didn't know it. I would guess lots of people don't know it.
It's not a very well known story, but that's part of the reason why Bible Society is really doing this project, is because we think it's a really important story in our culture, in our heritage, and we think it should become a well-known part of our history.
So you've got not one but two books telling the story. So what's the plan with those?
Yeah, Joy Cowley's written two versions of the story, a longer version which will be a larger normal format children's paperback for sale in bookshops, and then she's written a slightly abbreviated version which will be just like a smaller version of the larger book, and that'll be about 16 pages, and we're going to print as many as 200,000 copies of that. Wow. And give them away to primary school children around the country. And
you'll have pictures there'll be pictures that are part of the book?
Yeah, the illustrations in the book were done by Mary Glover Bibby, who was a Sunday school teacher from Waipawa, and she painted these paintings. They're quite large, roughly 1 metre tall by maybe half a metre wide, and she used them to illustrate the story at Sunday school classes. So we have these watercolour paintings that she did, and we're reproducing them in digital format for the book. So they'll be the illustrations alongside Joy Cowley's text.
Now, this is actually part of a wider project in that the Bible, which has been translated into Maori for many years now, but it's getting something of a facelift. It
has. Yeah, we've spent a number of years reformatting it. The most recent revision of the Māori Bible was 1952, and so what we've done is we've put it into paragraphs, because that version and the 52 version, each verse was on a new line. That was just the way it was done. It's all now been put into paragraphs. The long vowels have macrons on them, particularly for second language Māori speakers who find it difficult to read or write Māori without macrons. So the macrons are really important. We've got section headings, book introductions, just all sorts of different things that you might see in your modern English Bible that haven't been a part of the Māori Bible ever.
And also notice it's actually laid out with English on one side and Māori on the other, and it's spaced so that the verses line up, so you can actually almost read the translation across.
That's right, it's a diglot. So half English, half Māori, and that's actually been really well received. Really well received. Some people use the Māori Bible to learn to speak the language. So to have the English on one side is fantastic.
So the New Testament was out in December?
December last year.
So what about the Old Testament?
The Old Testament draft is almost complete. Probably in the next month it'll be finished. And that has to go through a rigorous process of checking, which will take many months. And then obviously once that's all done, off to the typesetters, and we'll publish the fully reformatted Māori Bible, hopefully sometime next year.
Fantastic. Well, Stephen, it's a fascinating story, and Tarore's legacy lives on. Thank you very much indeed.
A pleasure.